Hey, lovely people. Tyro Media is now back online.
I don't think I've done a solo book review yet on this show. Okay, in that case, let's talk about a book that incorporates the best elements that I feel of James Cameron's Avatar, Starship Troopers, and maybe even Disney's Up. Trust me, people, it's good. It's time to talk about the old man's war. This is a story about a 75-year-old man named John Perry. When the novel starts, he's actually visiting the grave of his recently deceased wife, and he's bidding her a final and heartfelt farewell. And after he bids her a farewell, he decides to join the army. Now, that does seem very strange. A 75-year-old man joining the army at the end of his natural lifespan, because he is about to die soon of old age. Why would he join the army? But guess what? This story is told in the distant future, where Earth is fighting an intergalactic war with various aliens, and they are actually incorporating seniors into the war effort to boost their troops. Which again, still doesn't sound like it makes much sense until you realize humans have the very similar technology that they had in James Cameron's Avatar. The technology where you can take one person's consciousness and put it into another being. Now, in Avatar, they took the consciousness, obviously, and put it in the alien species called Nati or whatever. But in this book, they take the human consciousness and they pull it into another human body. This human body is actually synthetically created, and it's a super soldier body. Think of it as a Captain America super soldier human body with, I would even say, more abilities than Captain America himself. So they take the mind of a 75-year-old man, someone who's lived a life, a full life, who has knowledge, who's mature, and they put it in the body of a super soldier. That sold me. I was very interested to read it after that premise. Yeah, so. Okay, people, before I get into the cool meat of the story and stuff, let me just digress just a little bit. For the past 6 months, during my book reading phase, I've been looking into what people are calling the 100 greatest sci-fi books you must read before you die. Now, this list is on so many sci-fi websites, and because it's on so many websites, there's slight variations on what titles are in these lists, but 80% of these lists have the same titles. And actually, let me read out some of them, because some of these titles are very well known, and they've already been made into TV shows, miniseries, and movies. To name a few, we've got Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I, Robot, War of the Worlds, Space Odyssey 2001, Solaris, Dune, and more recently, of course, Ender's Game. Now, of that 100 list, obviously not all of them have been translated into other media. Some of them you can only still find in written form. Some of them are still being produced into movies to this day. And I've actually gone through this 100 list. I'll put a link in the description if you want to see this list, by the way. But I've gone through this list. I found all of them available on audiobook as well. And I have to say, of the 100, I only found like 30 that I really loved. This Old Man's War being one of them. Now, this particular book, Old Man's War, in these 100 lists on various sites, is in the top tier, usually in the top 30 of most of these people's best sci-fi books, recent list. And I know this book was written recently, I believe in the early 2000s anyway, so it's actually quite prestigious for something like this to be so high up, and especially it was written in the last 10 or 15 years. On top of that, it was nominated for a Hugo Award, and I believe Paramount Pictures have auctioned this to be made into a movie already, so they're not in the pre-development phase or anything, but I think they're writing a script for this. And I think this would be a really great movie, a really great sci-fi movie anyway. Okay, so let's talk about the characters and the development. When you look at the characters, The thing that makes us really unique is because most of the characters are seniors put into the mind of young bodies. You know, you get a maturity from them. I really enjoy these characters. They don't have that kind of buck wild, wet behind the ears attitude like a young army would have. Like I said, in Starship Troopers, a lot of those characters were kind of teenagers to young adults, so they were rash and stuff like that. But these people are seniors. They've lived lives, so they can appreciate things about society. They have a better understanding. Not all of them are super mature, but they have a better depth to them because they're so old. But in their young bodies, they appreciate that as well. And I don't want to go into spoilers, but it's just really interesting to see what these guys do in their young bodies. You know what I mean? Like, take for instance a character from Up. Imagine putting that character in a young body and sending them off into space to do some crazy action shit. I know it's a very weird proposal I'm putting to you guys, but again, that's what they do in this book, and that's what makes it really interesting to see what these characters do, and they have really good characterization. I liked all the characters in this book. I mean, some of them, even the ones that act kind of silly, they have their reasons and they're explored. But this book is not boring, trust me. It doesn't go into any monologues or anything. You know, it's just done really well. The characterization is done really well. I do want to elaborate, but I'll have to get into spoilers, which I'm not going to do for this particular review. Okay, in terms of the story, pace, and execution, I really thought it was really great. Initially, the first 2 chapters, the initial setup of when John visits his wife and joins the army, that was a bit slow, so be warned, the first 2 chapters are quite slow. But after that, when he gets his new body, which happens again very early in the book, so it's not a spoiler, things just kick off. Very interesting. The characterization again is really good. It's an action story first and foremost, people. It's not that much dialogue driven. A lot is going on in the war. I don't want to get into. It's really hard for me not to elaborate without getting into spoilers, but it's really fast paced. It's really enjoyable. There's some tactical elements that slow the story down at times, but again, it doesn't take away anything from the overall story. It's an action story. It's about a guy living his second life again in the army. I liked all the characters. The pacing was good. And another thing I have to praise is, because it's a space war, the thing I like about this book is it doesn't focus on one particular race. Like a lot of these science fiction movies and stories, they always focus on one particular race. In this book, they go through about 3 or 4 different races. And even though these guys have super soldier bodies and they can do all this crazy athletic Captain America style things, trust me, when they get with some aliens, it don't matter. And they get fucked up by some of these aliens. They get really messed up. I mean, they're told in training, expect the unexpected, because some of these aliens, their compositions and stuff, it's actually described really well. It's very visceral, and yeah, I mean, things slowed down at the end of the book as well, but at the end it came together really well, and it had that heartwarming element that you got from Disney's Up. I know I keep throwing that in there, but trust me, it's apt. It's really apt. You guys know I'm an audiobook fiend, so I listened to this on audiobook. The audio publisher for this I got was from Audio Renaissance. The narrator was William DeFries. He did a really good job narrating the book and playing John as well. His cadence was good. I could hear the mannerisms. He did a few other little voices, but overall he was a perfect choice for this book. And you know, there's nothing more I could say. He really helped. A bad narrator can bring down a story. And you got to pick a good narrator for a story. Just like with voice acting for an anime or whatever, sometimes bad voicing bring a whole thing down, but they made a good choice and I was happy with that as well. Okay, so let's wrap this up with my likes and dislikes. I like the premise. I like the characterization between the characters. I like the character development as the story goes on. I like the world building. It's a sci-fi story. They do a really good job of describing all those elements to you, and they have good technicalities with the technologies and stuff like that. And I like the pacing. It's not the longest book. They keep things going. That brings me back to dislikes. It's a bit slow in the beginning. Some of the tactical elements are slow as the story progresses. It can be even a bit long-winded. Particularly the last arc got a little bit long-winded, but the actual ending did wrap things up in a really nice and heartwarming way. and it had kind of a bittersweet ending, but I think it could have ended a lot worse. In saying that, this is part of a little franchise. There's 4 sequels to this book actually, and this particular story, I was happy as a standalone. The sequels have they're in the same universe. The sequels are in the same universe, but they're not related. They're not the same characters, so you have to worry about that. I don't have a problem recommending this book solo, Old Man's War, on its own, and I'm going to give it a rating right now. It's a very, very solid B. Very, very solid B. I think this is going to make an excellent movie. I think this has the potential to be better than Starship Troopers. Because trust me, it does have the emotion there as well. Believe me, I didn't want to get into spoilers, but there are some emotional bits in there. And yeah, I think, hey, I love Starship Troopers, don't get me wrong. But this has the same elements, but just more maturity and even a little bit of a better story overall. So, Old Man's War, check it out. And I guess that's it. That's another episode of Tyro Media. I've been your host, Donald Wonder. Please like, comment, and subscribe the video. Tell your friends. If you got a suggestion for another cool book, leave it in the comments below. I'm always open to talk about great stuff. And that's it. I'll see you in the next one, people. Peace.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you on that point, particularly because it's that matter, and this is where I will say comics are at their weakest, is since they are owned by a corporation, that there is less freedom to it. Like, so many people have compared it. If you are a new writer or artist to Marvel or DC, like the analogy is that you are playing with their toys, and they expect them back just as they were when you put them back in the toy box. So you can come up with whatever story you want, but in the long run, it won't make much of a change because it's their character in the end.